Today I will make a case for how bias skews perception and expression of facts, and why there is no such thing as a truly unbiased perspective, using the community perception of Path of Radiance Ike's unit performance as an example argument. But facts are facts, truth is truth, is it not? One would believe it to be, and yet the goalposts of the burden of proof keep moving further away as we approach, a permanent mirage the human fascination will forever chase. Forgive me for getting poetic. There are multiple examples of this very thing happening in the world around us. To use some less heated examples, marketing claims certain rules as law about what you must or must not display, and yet those rules change constantly over time as genres and demographics evolve. Psychology, my area of major study, has gone through multiple waves in active study and practice, with each wave attempting to fix problems seen in the prior wave, yet all of them insistent that, this time, we know what's really going on with the human mind. And most controversial of all, Ike has been considered one of the best units in Fire Emblem, one of the worst units in Fire Emblem, and everything in between, with perception changing greatly over time despite the game itself releasing nearly 20 years ago. I feel old now. But to adequately tackle such a Schrodinger's unit, we need to understand why any of this matters. Why does anyone even care if a blue-haired kid in the 20-year-old video game is worth putting virtual experience points into? Because this is actually the question that matters. Ike has not changed as a unit in 20 years, so why is the community value around him changing? Are people using different metrics to measure unit strength? Maybe. Are they just trying to push a counterculture take to get attention and views? Someone probably is. I bet at least one person in the comment section is writing a comment right now accusing me of doing exactly that. Well, take your fingers off the keyboard and listen for just a second, Kevin, because I'm about to blow your mind. The perspective we enter an experience with, including our expectations, preconceptions, past experiences, and future desires, can all warp how we perceive the actual truth of the experience. The language we use, the people we listen to, both whom we agree with and whom we would disagree with, and the amount of mental effort that we put into any situation can all flavor the facts of the encounter. Attempting to go in with no preconceptions, clean of any spoiler or the opinion of others, is often considered to be the most unbiased a person can be, but even this setup creates its own share of biases, a greater expectation that your own opinion is somehow closer to the ephemeral true reality, for instance, when your past and future still tint your experience to be different than that of your peers, or even from yourself at a different time or a different place. This is why I usually try to claim to not ever be unbiased, as my personal understanding is that a perfectly unbiased view of anything is impossible, and anyone who claims to be genuinely unbiased is not worthy of your trust because they've already misused it. But enough about me, let's talk about Ike. After all, he's in the thumbnail and title of the video, and it would be pretty rude of me to stick him in there to trick my viewers into listening to me rant about philosophy. You can start typing those comments now. A unit of many phases, subject greatly to the whims of RNG, Ike begins as nothing special. 4 iron swords in his inventory and a lot of heart. If given the Chapter 1 Seraph robe, his bulk will let him fight the Chapter 2 bandits with a little fear, and we've already made our first assumption. But make that the second, because I never stated what difficulty this run is on. Most people assume the hardest available, but I personally don't give Maniac Mode the consideration of existence, given it wasn't on the disc that I had growing up. Heck, I could make another entire video about the difficulty assumption and how it's poisoning Fire Emblem discourse, but that's a topic for another time. Anyway, Ike is already getting ahead or falling behind. With the bulk of the robe, Ike still isn't guaranteed to do much damage, but he can still tank hits and sneak some levels here and there. Without that bulk, he needs more careful positioning and training, and can easily be seen as just a walking liability if his early levels aren't favorable. Going through the early game, where every unit plays a role, Ike's role is filler damage and seizing objectives. With no Forge access yet and 2x effective damage on his Regal Sword, he fails to get kills on his own, but this again is making the assumption of play patterns. Maybe Boyd died in Chapter 2 and Ike had to pick up the slack. Maybe Titania ate the Seraph robe and has been dominating the entire early game without leaving any scraps for Ike at all. This is still early in the game, and Ike's performance already is solidly within the box with the cat from the outside. Not dead, not alive, not a good unit, not a bad unit. You cannot know whether this particular Ike is a benefit or hindrance to the team until you open the box, put in the disc in the GameCube, and play it out. Ike is a microcosm of Fire Emblem as a whole, if not for all of human experience. We can sit around and talk about our expectations of him all day, or we can get our head in the game and put our controllers where our mouths are. I feel Ike himself would have some opinions on which of those paths he would take. Now, I'm not trying to say, don't talk about Fire Emblem, or to tell you not to share your experiences or try to give opinions on if something is good or bad. I feel like if I was saying that, I would be run out on a rail for building an entire channel atop an altar of hypocrisy. But bias is a terrifying beast, and it's difficult to see where it lies or what opinions it can create out of the same factual information. Some may say a unit who requires external resources to be viable cannot be deemed a good unit. Others may claim that the resources should be considered, but only to the unit for whom they make the greatest difference. We are not talking about Jill or Marcia here, but is the perspective that all bonus experience, stat boosters, and forge money should go to them not in itself a bias about optimal play patterns, including the very bias that optimal play patterns should be considered or even encouraged in discussions? I understand that some baseline of assumptions does need to be used to create a bed for discussion, but I am also wary around the idea that the assumed standard play patterns for most discussions also happen to be the patterns which the core of the optimization community default to. It brings to mind sketchy managers who set impossible goals purely because they needed a reason to let go of a team member that won't be pushed back on by HR. If we engage with some assumptive play patterns all the way through a long decision-filled playthrough of Path of Radiance, we can happen upon any number of Ikes. Because of main story events, they will still be promoted and holding the Ragnell, but beyond that, anything is possible. He could be 20/20 with all stats capped. He could be level 1 and hopelessly outmatched by even basic enemies. His journey through the game could have been marred by poor levels and being a burden carried in someone's saddlebags half the time, or he could have been fighting on the front lines, holding choke points and earning his kills in honorable combat. All of that leads up to the final moments of the game, where Ike, with his incredibly overpowered sword, is one of 3 units capable of even harming the final boss. This near requirement for him to fight solidifies his final performance as the experienced most players will walk away from the game with. Will he be the hero the game sets him up to be, or will he simply not be up to the task, letting Anna and Gifka take the spotlight? Is Ike the best unit because he stands alone at the top in the final hour, or does he hide behind the stronger fail-saves units because he just can't do it? Did he take a small loan of 1,000,000 bonus experience to get powered up, or did he naturally fight his way from nothing, earning every level up he got? Does the player even remember the journey for the destination, or do they only remember the highlights? And perhaps most of all, do we honestly believe our subjective experience of Ike is in any way generalizable to the greater public? If we do, then how can Ike be both the best and worst unit in the same game? And if we don't, then how can we even have a conversation about him to begin with? I hope this attempt at a one-way Socratic dialectic wasn't too infuriating. I know there's probably a better term for this, but it's far too late while I write this in my exhausted stupor of being unable to sleep without any good video ideas, so this is what you get. I hope at least some of this was useful or insightful, or at least entertaining. If you want me to just shut up and talk about Fire Emblem, links to the Discord are in the description. A big shout out to the Royal LaguzGuard member Sal Mellon and LaguzGuard members C2 Pigally, Enigmatic Mr. L, The Big Herman 007, Bro Duderman, Kumi, Miss Mesmerism, Lakag, and Relaz6 for supporting the channel. You are the reason I push myself to make videos almost every week. Without you, I would probably just be letting this channel rot in my burnout brain. But until next time, this is Mithril Zenith signing out.